the patina of tempo. It's sort of the living experience on top of the music. I believe that it's an ingredient that comes with the breathing, not the tempo in terms of pulse beats per minute, but the inhaling, the exhaling, a psychological tempo, and it oscillates, and it's intuitive. Some twist further and back, and some stay more in the main straight line of the tempo. Depends on the direction of the line, the length of sound and its decay, picked where it dropped, and then brought further. It has to be wavy in order to remain constant on the decaying instrument, so that in denial, as most pianists of us are, that the instrument is not percussive because we can sing. We sing the vibration after the hit of the string by the hammer and the pedal and the acoustic. But these ingredients aren't anything without the inner ear and the heart projecting the way the tempo makes us elegantly, nonchalantly, or drivenly move. And I think that it's not a zigzag, it's not either an obligation, like some kind of topping, or some kind of accessory to the interpretation. It should be integral part of the expression of the space between the words, the interrupted silences of music. Of a tree where there is a breeze of wind on the tip of it. So it stays straight, but still shakes, but slightly shivers more than shake. If it's too much, the rubato distracts from the elegance of the eloquence, even more than elegance, or both, of the sentence. In fact, the music is a grammar, but the meanings are poetic. It's like words. And they vehicle thoughts. But they suggest emotions, which, by the way, don't need so much grammar. You feel very clearly, even without me missing the high C, that when you have a leap of a tenth into the highest register, it's a scream. And when you have the sixth Napolitan six darkening the flat second first inversion degree, you feel that sense of dropping of emotional, almost inner defeat compared to if it was the regular second degree and the chromatic scale on top. It was its skeleton. But I think that if everything the composer's thought is embedded in the notation in terms of emotion, expression, grammar, direction of line, expression for the eloquence of the eloquent storytelling, and the tempo, which keeps us in check, especially if we play with an orchestra or solo. So between rigid and tipsy, there is something in between, which I think is patina of life. In my personal experience, it has been so that when I was young, I used to play Chopin's music relatively more in tempo. And I find myself playing everything with more rubato now. It's almost as if with age, I express more what the music means to me through my playing, obviously, since it's subjective point of view. It's an eye of the beholder, in my case, me, than only trying to be the objective transmitter between the written notation and the conductor through, or just directly the audience, therefore. Conducting oneself, therefore, with integrity is to keep the tempo. The sense of tenderness is not even necessary to be told. It's so obvious. It's like describing the description if I put words on it. Even if in spoon-feeding teaching sometimes I'm obliged to overly explain every affect, a suspension, an appoggiatura, an anticipation, a repeated note, an insisting note, a passing tone, a harmonization, a delay, melodic harmonization, all these ways that the composer chooses to bring the music to go through its tension and release on the tonal system alphabet, of delaying or anticipating or on the point or heroically arriving or decaying or even lamenting, and combining various harmonic artifacts. It's not artifact, it's artifice, it's false cognate. But this is true. The Neapolitan 6 is a flat second degree. It's a F major chord in the middle of E minor. It's not even harmonic. Well, it is, but it is atmospheric. Literally, so to say, you feel the chills in your back when you feel that the Neapolitan 6 is sort of a cold chill, and the minor is the sorrowful tenderness. Again, words diminish the meaning of what the music means itself and doesn't need the words to explain it. But sometimes when you teach, you try to explain the unexplainable. But what I'm trying to give as example in the performance is that it's not about right or wrong, good taste, bad taste, because it evolves through times and as well as into regions, into generations of different traditions. It's always that untold, unmeasurable element that you put between the notes that creates that sense of charm or conviction or disagreement in the listener. It's a rupture of disbelief as the English actors learn how to become believable in the act. And I think that if you play in denial of the rubato, then you try to keep away from something that in fact calls for some almost to surrender to it. Of course, you can indulge it and overindulge in it because of the audience, where there is a level of seduction through the piece in its best acceptance, at least in the most elegant acceptance of the word. You don't need, and the composer doesn't need my help to make his music more seductive, if that is the word, or more emotionally bonding, that's the word I was searching, with the listener, knowledgeable or unknowledgeable in music. It's sort of like a direct psychological connection with the psyche or the yeah, even a subconscious of the listener and through the performers. And the leap or the delay, like the relief of the second theme in relative major in the recap comes in the principal key major for the E minor Chopin concerto. This kind of wellness mood, almost as descriptive as probably pastoral. And Chopin often tosses half or full minor inside. The leap of the third degree to the leading tone, diminished fourth, avoiding the tonic in an exchange of voice. But just choosing one G natural to symbolize minor and the D sharp symbolizing major, minor, major. Suggests for the minor six some inner turmoil, something is not going to be right, but you still have to be hopeful in the melody, to be in major, while you're minor in the lower viola part if you want left hand. And then when you expose that same G but this time octave in the top melodic line, it's almost you scream your sorrow, which was stifled in the first time in the left hand. And then after the repeat of that cell, the extension of the direction of the line in full major, rip right. Psychologically in this long phrase that goes from half minor to full major, that this is it. We prevailed psychologically in the expression, even if it's no lyrics to say it like in singing. Obviously that diminished seventh, like in the opening of 109 by Beethoven, soothingly, and then the diminished seventh is the ultimate double triton to Devils in Music, worrisome chord, the one that brings mayhem or fear of, oh my God. It's almost the epitome of drama. And you get halfway reassured by the composer, by a secondary dominant of C sharp minor, and then from far away he initiates a return to E major, to the relative minor, C sharp minor, and using the augmented second dropping from the leading tone. Inserted hope, and even more intensely a appoggiatura dropped, the anticipation, the delayed beat, the appoggiatura on the passing tone creating a dissonance like a painful stab, and taking all these little elements elements of affect separately, they become patchworked affects, and it's too much, or how much is not enough. Because either you decide that the melodic grained line, direction, structure, construction, sentence meaning prevails over all these affects in order to create a sense of, yes, I'm going through many special and different emotional stages, psychological manipulation of the audience's expectation of hope and despair, and basically all the human nature's feelings which bring us to our humanity, or to try to elevate ourselves beyond and above and be crushed down to what it is. All this is not told in words. It's suggested in these harmonic melodic effects, but if you choose to start more factually, matter of fact, and if you do, you insist on every bump on the road that brings you a wound or a stabbing or an expectation, and all of a sudden you lose the meaning of the sentence because you're overwhelmed in the emotion of the details, like passing next to an accident that just happened with a car, and you go, oh my God, what a tragedy. And that sense of tragic is in the music of Chopin so transparent. It's no more shaped within the form or the sonata form, in which in the early days of Haydn and so on, the form prevailed on the substance, and here substance is freely expressing itself. It's like a monologue of the character of this operatic concerto, right hand solo singing part on the piano, expressing all the opera bel canto effects of the hero. But again, with only musical alphabet, obviously, and not with syllables. So what I was trying to say earlier is that when I was younger, of course, I was taught about rubato coming from the Italian verb stealing, and stealing time. And it's the Robin Hood system of moralization of theft, which is to take from the rich to bring to the poor. You could say that in a way the rubato also should be in a way ethically right, if what you take more time to express this stabbing, as I call it, intuitively or willingly you recuperate immediately by slightly rushing the ending of this subphrase, so that what you took more there, you could catch it back here. So overall, you have a sense of balance without to be straight. You could be crooked on one side, and then you reestablish your balance. And so you have this kind of sense of intuitive holding the balance of the expression versus the meaning, the sound of the word or the sound of the note, and the meaning of the note within syllables, creating words, and therefore vehicling a thought. And that thought could be also the emotion, not just the sound of it, or combining both in case these effects over express the expression itself. It's like when you speak and you take more time between words or less, is also, regardless of what you're saying, is embedded in the way you say it or you convey it. And so I don't want to think that it's, in a teaching situation, my place to forbid, nor to entitle the rubato. I think it's to nurture it. And not only analytically by the affects, though they needed to be known, what type and where they are, and what kind of mood they create independently in the detail, but then how you put them together in a sentence. And therefore, what is the sentence meaning? Don't play prettyful, play meaningful. And meaningful can be pretty full, and meaningful can be emotional too. It's not exclusive. I find of each other. I find it very striking when I hear performers who you feel in their playing, or you hear through their playing, their intention to not give in to all these effects and maintain the melodic line and the harmonic progression and all, basically all the texture, solo with chamber or orchestra, bring us from point A to point B. Without to close our eyes, without to overindulge into the details, but relatively having the arrival point justify the means, and not overindulging in all the effects before you reach the point which by that time the long sentences, the run-on sentences of Romantic era in music as well, sometimes in literature like in Proust, makes us lose the point. So we enjoy it for the decorative aspect, for the emotional aspect, but not for the meaningful aspect. And the day you can, as a performer, combine both, is that you found somehow how to answer to what you received from the score, more or less notated, more or less codified, more or less, less than more, detailed for the in-between the words, notes, sounds, sentences, syllables. And then it becomes the moment you tell it through your words, even if you use the composer's words, and therefore through your notes. Sections can be also tiny bit rubato, of course, very, very tiny bit, so that you feel like there is it's humanity also in the quick articulation 16th notes. Of course, I don't advocate to place a rubato in a motoric element section, because that sounds like the opposite of the desire of the composer, writing flowing notes or a cascade of quick notes. It's also partly the driven section rather than the singing section, which in this case, in abandon, takes its time. And I find it very interesting when I compose, since I don't know how the dead composers conceived that freedom in their piece unless we have their interpretation. Rachmaninoff, yes, we do. Chopin, we don't, unfortunately. Or perhaps fortunately, because this way we can define what we think he wanted on behalf. I'm laughing because obviously it's always an educated at best guess, but it becomes tradition through this schooling and that lineage of this teacher who studied with such and such, the Liszt connection and the Chopin, and everybody then builds up at some point some kind of educated knowledge about it, and then when they play, they play. So I don't know how the composers imagine, those whom I teach, and mostly of them dead, intended these freedoms, if any, between what they notated and what we play, of what it means to us, as individually as each of us, obviously, means differently to each. But I know for my music, therefore I only can speak for that very humbly, when I compose, like for instance the Seven Sisters Ballad, legato, overwhelming, overholding, but just releasing after the next in order to create a sense of vowels in a connection without syllables, consonants, sorry. And of course, I don't indicate rubato on the score. I write the groups of eighth notes in the bar. I put a hairpin that suggests there is a build-up of emotion. But that's some kind of obvious to any musician who would eventually play it. If you have to tell them that, is that you spoon-feed them into what is tension release of tonality that they deal with in classical music all their life. Unless you have to say something rambunctious like Beethoven sometimes does in that same tonal system with the sforzando purposely in the place where it's provocative or therefore expressively personalized and almost customized to him. But if it's not indicated, you would do naturally this. I'm sorry again for this lack of humility to give an example with my music after Chopin. It's just that I only can speak here on my own experience, that when I composed it, I heard it, like I like to say, composing is a distant reminiscing of something far, far deep inside you that you almost think you remember for having heard it or been in it. It's almost like a country or place. And you retrieve it, and then nostalgia in it, the parallel tense, all these things I didn't tell myself when I was composing it, all these affects, I just did it because it just came out. But just like frozen lava, now it's there and it's stuck like that. It is not going to be another option unless I improvise something different, but this is written, even if it was originally in the improvisatory mood. You see how every time I replay the opening sentence, I insist on delaying the melodic first note. Let me tell you how much I would like to dance with you, and any kind of cheesy words that come to mind. Or then just play what's written, which is and I personally think that the interpretation is not an added topping to the dessert. It's more like the DNA of the very thought process of the piece. It's embedded in it. It should not overwhelm the melodic direction of the line, but it shouldn't ignore it either. It's a subtle balance between what you say and how you say it, and on what you want to insist compared to what is self-evident. It's self-evident it's in C minor. It's self-evident that it's nostalgic, even if it didn't have those very notes. If it was it would be still the same basically mood, to say something very simple. You can call it atmosphere, you can call it, you can define it, you can almost classify it and then shape it in something. But then if you do it as a reminiscence in the interpretation, then you can do it without too much hairpin in terms of stay inside, introverted rather than extroverted, not expressive, impressive. And in this case, my left hand plays the steps of the motion, and the right hand, obviously, the melodic sentence, narratively telling a story, and the middle note holding the ostinato that sort of, nests our soul in one note. It's very Slavic, the ostinato, for that. But does it mean exclusively that because I play the opening bars of my Seven Sisters ballad, that I know how it's supposed to be played. If I am played as a composer, I would be delighted to hear people appropriate it to themselves in order to bring it to the others. It's like you make the recipe, but somehow it becomes a little bit more customized than what is in the recipe's text when people taste it, and when you put the different levels of ingredients, perhaps by a little difference, it changes the aftertaste or the whatever it happens. Same thing here. I think that if somebody plays, I would find that a bit fast, but if it means to them nostalgia, because I think it cannot not, but at different levels, then I cannot but be thankful for them seeing something different in it that I saw in terms of interpretation, part of the piece itself, or more rubato. Or just and each of these options have their charm, in the sense, musically, that you don't over insist on something that you consider holding for self-evident. It's minor, it has step motion, it has a song, and it has an accompaniment, and it has an ostinato. It's all already in the notes. So if I just stay the least involved and let the music speak itself, then I'm sort of like in the loudspeakers, the vibrating membrane to the electric movements, and then I translate the music in sounds from electric movements. So I play Chopin, and I play already the first note, but I could play it more expressively to go further in the slow tempo. Or if I don't have enough decay, but then it depends of my capacity to play from close up the 16th notes in the broken arpeggios with their own pulse of 2 times 3 within the 3 times 2. Almost as Chopin says, ignore your right hand what the left hand does. Sublime and ridiculous, but nevertheless it is an expression of humanity, even if it's mine. And here it's not mine, it's his or yours, despite of the objectivity of the publishers or pretend so. They give us that sense of boundaries, and we try to break them. So now I insist on the agitation of all these effects, delayed, repeated notes, and even the melodic notes, also ostinato, as if I'm telling something that is a run-on sentence that tells this and that and this there and this here, and or contemplative. So the or end is the question. Is it that and or this or that? Is it right or wrong? How much or not enough? To rubato or not to rubato? Or rubato much? I think it's most meaningful when it's harmonious in the expression of one's playing during the performance, regardless if you can yourself disagree after a recording of it, to say, oh, I should have this, I should that next time. That's very important self-critical aspect, think outside of the box. But while you are playing, you're involved in it. It's no more music of the past, it's music of the present. During the moment you cherish it. Of course it was played and read and recorded and loved and explained and taught and memorized by generations before you and probably after you, for sure. And you're there just passing in front of it. And you try to bring your own grain of salt. I mean, you have to be yourself. You don't want to just constantly deny and say, because it's our text, therefore, because I don't want to over-involve, because I don't want to over add on the expression itself by a rubato, which would be too much to the eyes of some, not enough to others. Those ingredients are immediately subject to the eye of the beholder. So as a teacher, you have to give some kind of direction of the meaning of how and why you choose to do this beyond the example that you can play to the student, but rather explain a little bit analytically how the sentence goes, musically speaking, through the different affects, how to understand the meaning of the indications on the score, and how to absorb all that and find the pace which corresponds to the melodic expression that you can provide, and not betray even your own intentions with a note that sounds louder than another, and you feel like, oh, why didn't it come out like I used to when I practiced? The instrument is different every time almost. All these variables are constantly there to, in fact, discourage us or distract us from the aim, which is to go to the end of that sentence and tell it with eloquence, meaning, expression, all of that, not only either or, in a certain way that you want to bring yourself forward there. That's why when you practice, you repeat. And the more you repeat, the more you, in fact, explore and attempt a little further in the groove, a little inside the track, a little going further out to rejoin by merging in traffic back into the tempo after you took some time. Either over at once or little by little. But if you think of that in such details as I try to explain them here, while you play, you'll be distracted, and at best you'll syllabically pronounce words, be it expressively, but not obviously meaning. Let's establish first what is the meaning of the section and how you're going to negotiate your passing through this section. The terrain, the atmosphere, the background, the color, the light, everything in the sound landscape, soundscape, is what you create atmospherically with your playing on the piano, even if the ingredients of the notes and the values of the rhythm are obviously given, and you're not going to negotiate with that, because after the composer died, the toolbox is closed, and so to say, you're not going to ask from the Chopin Foundation the authorization to add this appoggiatura there. So in fact you recite more than you retell. But then there is a level of retelling within the recitation that makes it more meaningful to some people who even don't know the piece and who end up liking it because of the way you said it. Even if objectively the piece is said differently by others, And they might not like it, because somehow it's also the personal stage charisma. It's just like love. It's just like a human connection. You look at a gaze and you go, ah, and you don't have to always analyze it. Why and how much and why I'm touched by that? Is it empathy? Is it emotion, or oversensitivity for some, or not enough for others? It's all depending where you put the cursor. And of course, the industry of playing, the control of the touch, is overwhelming and sometimes blinding away, or from the aim of the music making, because you're bothered by the fact that your fingers and the keys don't respond the way you would like them musically to do, either because of your lack to control, either because it's uncontrollable acoustically, not responsible for the architect of the building, nor for the manufacturer of the piano, let less about the shape in which the piano is the day you play. Of course, you can always argue and find reasons to be explaining why you're disappointed by mostly using these excuses, which are in a way vain but true. You do with what you have. And you try to transcend the moment. You try to transcend the elements, to transcend the shortcomings, your own or the environmental situation of the moment, the atmosphere, it's tense, the people listening, you feel nervous, your muscles don't respond like you do in your practice room. There's a level of desire to bring it to them, perhaps a little more ecstatically, perhaps a little too much of each element, because you want to like them. For them to like it rather than you, well, perhaps both. Surely both. I like when teachers say that the held note doesn't decay on the piano, which it does, because there are pages in the left hand of this Chopin nocturne create that connection that would be the vibrato, or the sung vibrato, but you cannot on the piano do a crescendo or a vibrato on a held note. And if the vibrato is in the left hand, it can also overwhelm the decay of the right hand. So yes, there is a sort of feeding each other by the elements of the texture. The musical expression becomes holistic. It's a bit of everything: the resonance, the accompaniment, the pedal, the harmonic progression, the melodic line, the notes of the composer, and then at the same time you delay something more than it's meant rhythmically, the 2 against 3. There's so many ways, or at least fewer ways, to play the 2 of the 3 and the 2 of the 2 have the 2 against 3, the 2 again of the 2 brush against the 2 against 3, or delay it. And all of a sudden this passing tone is given more meaning. I would like. So is it I or like or would that you want to express more meaningfully? And sometimes a miscellaneous part of the sentence becomes more expressed because it's the way it came out. Or willingly or unwillingly. But of course you're not going to, because that's not the note. Even if you could say, I would have wished he had done it. As my teacher would have said, then write your own. Or then play his, or what you perceive to be what he or she, of course, the author, let's put it this way, wanted. And if the teacher or the publisher or the recording engineer or the musicologist or the scholar tells you passing tone is just a function, regardless if it's delayed into 2 against 3, don't give it too much meaning, because then you don't have any more the vision of the line. You want to bring it to the dominant, this drop, and a melodic sentence going all the way to this note. And then if on the way you get distracted by this and by that, and this rose and that smell, and this, it's an awareness to have musically, that you're sensitive to express everything that you feel is meaningful or emotional, or just that you love it. I have to tell you how beautiful this is. Or you do, and you continue. Exhale at the end of the sentence with your own physiological breathing. And if you count, as I like to always say, teach when you practice, you should count independently of the legato, if it is in a staccato way. So you can say 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. So you give yourself a pulsed counting, unrelated to a certain singing counting, which would be 1, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. And that's even without syncopations, when it's easier to count or sing or pulse in your mind or speaking loud voice on the notes you play, but on the beats being off the beat that you don't play. So you have the space between the tension build, the release. What the conductor does is not play, and the others play, but they don't conduct. Even they all count. Personally, now that I exposed to you differently, with an open mind, the tolerance I have for different expressions of levels of expressions of the rubato in the music sentence, in the music meaning, in the music expression, and all that together. It doesn't mean I have no set personal choice, preference. Would it be intuitive and analytical, or just learned or experienced? Might as well be as well in my age, but at my age. But I find that I search for the genuine authenticity of the students expressing themselves through something I expressed myself, and others will express themselves through after us, as they did before us. And I find that it's very reassuring and sometimes very telling how they hear it differently from me, but meaningfully. And it's to do with how you hear the piece before you even play it, before you even read it, before you even detailed it. And once you've done all this detail, how to put it back and make it just go through its tracks, its imaginary tracks, and you just flow or float or drive or roll, or whichever, and the sensation that you will take a little time. My teacher said not too much, but I really need to take some time. Or my teacher said you should take more time here, but I don't feel like it because it's too cheesy or too emotional, or I think people will be bored. I mean, there's so many parasite thoughts that come to mind when you play, if you try to sort of organize it, adjust it on the spot, especially in public. I find that it's very emotionally driving, and sometimes emotionally also conclusive for the audience, that, my God, he or she, if they really live the music they play, it means to them so much. You say it with a conviction, even if you might, even yourself, disagree with how you just did, but on the spot, you cannot be a referee and a player at the same time. I think you have to be in the game, in the show, in the play, in the explanation, in the saying, in the conveying. Yeah, convey it as it means to you. And I think when it's crystal clear to you how you want it because of what you read, heard, understood, or taught, or analyzed, or contradicted. Regardless, you reach the point, you say, that's how I want it today, and I'm going to do it this at the best. I don't want to betray myself of what I want to bring to the audience of the piece. And sometimes it's like with parents, you disagree and you try to do something they tell you not to, and because you're convinced, and even if at the end it turns out success, or sometimes I told you so. I don't think the teacher is here to have this kind of, at least in my aesthetic understanding, you guide but you don't stifle, or you don't guilt the student, and you don't overwhelm them with your experience, because the experience, yes, most of it is experience. If not, why teach? The piece is self-evident in many ways, as I said in the notation, and but then between the notation of the composer, the publications, the recordings, the traditions, the different ways, in a way, you cannot explore them all. It's like when people say, oh, I love you, you're the only person in the world to me. It's not like you objectively went to check all the others, because then you wouldn't have enough lifetime. So obviously, it's an eye of the beholder. And I think that makes it so meaningful to the listener, because you feel compelled, and therefore you're compelling. And I think that's nothing more or less than self-evident. Of course, I'm in the position as a teacher to try to keep the student from going perhaps overboard, but again, it's a question of taste, and I will never say how much I am surprised myself. This patina on the statues is with the patina on the pieces that I've played for a long time in my life, and been very good companions of that trip of life. And it doesn't have to do only with the Romantic era. It can be a Bach prelude, which its own level of candor, which will never be the second theme of Chopin's E major, even if I play to the same instrument, to the same tonality, and I can say, oh, there are so many common points. Oh, because it's Baroque, I don't. Or because it's Romantic, I should overstate. Or because it's too much said, I should just... I think you forge with time your own taste. And I find that beautiful and moving. See, some child prodigy, they seem to know it all by intuition, and you feel like, oh my God, all this, and I can never reach that level of evidence or obviousness, or just like, how do they know all that when they're barely, I don't know how old, young. And on the other hand, it's also very moving to see somebody who has been through the experiences of the music, and who puts in the, integrates the experience of life through the music itself, not just life, but yeah, it's all. And all of a sudden you find that the music sentence is even more meaningful with that little delay between this and that note. And you really cannot always, it's like defining the charm of somebody you love. Yeah, you could define it by the time you say it, it's more anatomic than else. And then if it's all spiritual, then you cannot really define it, but you just enjoy it, or you appreciate it, or you long for it. And I find that teaching should be, of course, putting rules and organizing a way to break those rules by understanding the meaning of these rules, bringing you to a next stage of musical expression. And then liberate yourself from these rules, those ties that liberate. But if everything is allowed, then you don't have a meaning in a sentence musically. And if you're stifled and you're told to stay only in tempo, you feel like you don't express enough what it means to you. Therefore, you don't feel like you're really participating to share with the audience what it means to you. When you're playing chamber music, you share the same piece with others, but they have different parts. Therefore, they contribute on a different level, but there it's an interaction because they play. The audience doesn't play, the conductor doesn't play, but there's an interaction, magnetic one, between the upbeat and the downbeat, bringing them or holding them from running into the next beat, and sort of shaping in the air this energy that the music itself has. And when you play, it's a discourse between yourself and yourself to the benefit of the audience. And it all happens in the practice room before. But then you practice in order to allow to be, in a way, what's the word? Deal with the unexpected, because you've planned for different things, but you're not sticking on a plan to the detail, to the dot. And if you are, I think you're rigid-minded. And if you can, you need to build that, do it for a given time, and I think teaching should bring that mapping. And then at some point, inevitably, you have to say, this note means that, and then you feel like when the hairpin brings you further than you wished, or when it can be more linear, more brought up, the harmonization in major, the Schumann concerto, the leap of the octave is an impatience before the beat, and then the delay of the resolution and the syncopations over the beat. 2, 3, 1. So you have to be your conductor and your musician, your tension builder and your release. Integrate all that and just give it your own reading and allow it to be different from the practicing, as if you plan it on the spot, because you know very well the different paths on the garden. You take this because you know you can do this to catch up to this and go through there. There's always the motoric element. But then when this second or melodic theme comes, like in the Tchaikovsky concerto, or it comes as a chorale, and you say, oh, it's so tender, it's so meaningful, it's so emotional, all these or other words. Different time periods, unlike in the past, on the same instrument on top of it, then you feel like this Bach prelude is having the same expression for you of emotional dimension than the Bach prelude. So you shouldn't overindulge to imitate it. If all expressive things are expressive, they're not all from the same style. And again, I always think it has to be a positive choice, not a negative, I shouldn't do it because it's not supposed to. And then you play. Okay, I'm devil's advocate, I made too much of it to prove the point. But it can be without rubato and still expressive. So this lament with the repeated notes can become. Acknowledge the downbeat, and then you flow to the next upbeat, and dissonance brings the next realization in its resolution. So if you take all these effects in the Tchaikovsky second theme in the same mood, you can take that time to express this high note because of the arpeggio, delaying it, or straight to the point in order to bring the linear line regardless of the harmonization and the delay, or you see, the more I say, the more I enter in that divide between should I or I cannot not. Should I indulge or should I withhold? Or should I be convincing by not withholding and just choosing it is the meaningful path? At least today, now, on the moment of the day of the now. The now of the now. Yeah, I think that since I'm turning in rounds in my explanations, I shall say thank you, and I shall say Rubatoo much.